Isn't it crazy how we can have a perfect blank page in our sketchbook and beautiful art supplies we really want to use, but when the time comes to be creative, we don't know what to paint? I think it happens because there are endless possibilities and it's really hard to narrow them down to a single page. So today I'm here to help you with that decision by sharing weirdly satisfying ideas that you can use to fill your sketchbook. And I'm very excited about today's video because Ohuhu is sponsoring it, which means I get to play with their beautiful acrylic paint markers. I cannot wait, so let's get creative. Here's the acrylic marker set from Ohuhu I'm using today. I've already swatched them on a previous video, so today we're going to jump right in and I'll talk about them as we create. I'm going to start by taping down a rectangle on my page because I wanted a white frame around my first idea. I jump right in without drawing with pencil first, and I just start drawing a curved line and filling in the space with the marker. And maybe with this one you can easily guess what I'm doing as I draw more of these irregular diagonal lines. Yes? No? Well, I am painting in abstract landscape. I'm not really worried about the shape of the mountains. I'm just drawing random lines and adjusting the composition a little bit with my paint markers if I want to. Because, you know, that is one of the advantages of paint markers. You can easily go over things without having a streak mark. With all the mountains drawn and painted in, I decided the next thing I want to do is paint all of that sky. And then I go over any edges of the mountains that I have may missed and polish those. Again, an advantage of the paint markers. Now here's the fun part, and I really wanted to start with this idea because I like using the smaller nibs on these markers so much. They run great and so far none have clogged for me. I'm adding details on every single area, and these markers are ideal for this because you don't need to try to match the color on your own or to get more markers in different sizes. So I'm playing with the width of the lines I paint on top, and I also tried creating a texture and having a little bit of fun experimenting. On this mountain here, I combined thick and thin lines, and it was great not having to switch markers, much faster. I just didn't have to put it down. When I was done applying texture on all of the areas of the mountains, I thought I would add some trees to complete the scene. I also added a little bit of bushes between the mountains, and with that it's time for that weirdly satisfying flawless tape peel. Did you see that? I quickly became obsessed with how crisp this line is. Yum, yum, yum. And I also really like the end result, and I definitely think this could be sold as a print, so I enlarged it so we can envision it as one. Okay, next one. And before I forget, there's a coupon code in the description of this video if you want to purchase the markers and get a discount. Again, I started taping the edges, and this was not actually part of my original plan, but it was so satisfying to peel it on the previous page, I decided I'm gonna use a little edge again. Now we're gonna do some layering, and because you know I like flowers, I'm going to use those. I start by drawing a floral design with the lightest color I'm going to use in this composition. Then I drew some leaves with the thinner nib of my second color on top of that. For the areas where I can easily predict where the leaf will fall, I don't go over my previous drawing and I just eyeball it, but where I want a more precise shape for the leaf, I do go over the yellow parts. Then I am coloring, what's the right word for markers? I fill in the areas in between the flowers and the leaves with yellow, filling the background with color. Then I filled in all of the leaves too. I was thinking to paint the flowers next, but I thought I would make my page a little bit more interesting by adding even more texture to the back. So I went back over the yellow by using my neon yellow and drawing more lines. Again, in the parts where I could eyeball it, I didn't go through the whole leaf, but in other parts I did try to get straighter lines, so I drew on top. I also decided the leaves needed more interest, so I drew lines on top of them with a blue marker. I chose purple to paint all of the circles that represent the floral buds, the stems, and the centers of the flowers. For the flowers themselves, I thought I would make them pop out a little bit more by painting them with red. There were some areas where I did have to do a second and third layer because the red wasn't really covering all of the green, But with paint markers, this is a very fast and easy thing to do. I also tried to make a smaller circle with a lighter purple on top of the buds, but I didn't like it, so I just went over them again with the darker shade of purple and covered that. Then, to finish the page, I added some veining to the petals with the magenta and some little blue dots around the centers of my flowers. And again, you might think I'm crazy, but this is my favorite part for this whole video. How satisfying is pulling off these tapes? It's so delicious. That's a crazy artist thing to say, but it's delicious to pull it out and get such a nice crisp line. I don't usually get these amazing lines when I paint with acrylics and brushes, so I was beyond excited. Again, let's just turn this into a print with the magic of a mock-up and admire the design. Okay, moving on to the third idea. I'm going to use tape again because I want to have that satisfaction again. I'm sorry, I apologize. Also, on this one, I wanted to test something for you, so I covered the square with a little bit of clear gesso. I did this because I wanted to see if the pens would be much better on a treated surface, but honestly, the difference is so minimal, I wouldn't take this extra step in my sketchbook again. I know paint markers can eat into the paper and rip tiny pieces off, but honestly, in the pages I did before, it's been absolutely fine. And if anything was left over on top, I was able to brush it off with my hand when it dried. So I'm good with not using gesso. And now I'm ready for yet another satisfying tape peel. I mean, look at that yellow and the white next to it. Yum, yum, yum. Moving on, I decided I wanted to paint a asymmetrical butterfly. On my last video, I figured out that these Ohuhu markers are super juicy and they blend easily. So I decided I was going to work fast and layer colors and allow them to blend a little bit. I'm using very bright colors, and you can see here, especially with the orange, how it's mixing with the other ones. The paint just moves around, and that painterly effect is the one I was going for. It was a really nice experiment blending all of the colors and just learning how the paint moves with a marker nib. When that first layer dried, I did go over some of the areas just to make the color less muddy while keeping some of the parts where it had mixed. I also added more yellow on top for it to be brighter. And then I also went ahead and added a second layer of paint on the bottom wings. Finished it off by painting the butterfly's body and its antennas, and done. That's my third idea. I had so much fun painting this and using my markers in a painterly way. I loved it. For the following idea, I started by drawing a pencil line to mark a direction for what I was going to paint. And my idea was to do a repetition of elements in a gradient of colors. I did erase that line a little bit because I just needed a super light guide. Basically, what I'm doing here is drawing these tear-shaped elements, just repeating them and switching colors. I drew them with the thinner nib because it's easier for me to control and get a more precise shape, and then I just filled them up with the thicker one. Because I am going in rainbow order, after the pink I use magenta. Same process, draw them and fill it out. Then draw them and fill them out, and so on with the other colors: orange, yellow, green, and finally blue. When I was done with all of the colors, I thought I would improve the composition a little bit more by adding some more of these, what are these, teardrop shapes or petals? I don't know, I was just trying to improve it because honestly, this is not one of my favorite things I've ever done. I actually had to take a break after this one because I disliked it so much. I was about to have an artistic tantrum and paint over it and discard the whole video idea. But after a little break, I decided that was silly because I loved the previous three ideas and not all pages can be hits, right? I think the idea is valid, but the execution was not great. I should try it again with different shapes or by changing the scale or something to land on a result I would like. Anyhow, breathe through it and on to the fourth idea. For this one, I am going to be painting a tree, and I have to apologize for the quality of some of this footage. I didn't notice the autofocus was playing games with me. I started by drawing a trunk, and I also taped this page, which was completely unnecessary, but I quickly grew obsessed with the tape peeling and the crisp lines. Can you tell? I drew the tree and then drew the canopy, which was just curved lines with some random shapes in the middle to make it look like foliage. So far, so good, right? And you can see it already looks like a tree even though I'm using black and gray. Then I drew some circles on it to try something different. Someone asked me to show how to paint my love trees, but since I already have a full tutorial on this channel on how to do them, I thought I would show you how I've done other types of trees. Trees are a subject that I'm always pursuing. I'm always trying to paint them and come up with ideas on how to represent them. You can see on this sketchbook just how many I painted and all of the ideas I try. So yeah, I'm just showing you how to experiment. After I painted and layered the circles with different colors, I peeled the tape off, and of course it's super satisfying, but it was a little bit underwhelming. And maybe what I should have done is just extend the canopy and be done with it. But I chose to put the tape back on and paint the entire background. On this close-up, you can see how the paper does scratch up a little tiny bit with the markers. That's why I tried the gesso in the previous page. But again, I don't think this is necessary, as you can brush it off with your hand when it dries and it looks perfect. I painted the whole background, and again, here comes that weirdly satisfying tape peel. I'm sorry, you're probably done with that, but I just loved it and love it so much. Anyhow, here's the final result. I think the idea would work better if I had chosen my colors differently, but because the lilac was an afterthought, I just think it doesn't look good. It's definitely a fail for me, another one on the same video. But honestly, failing has taken a different dimension now that I'm sharing what I do so publicly. I'm learning to embrace it little by little, like I did with my private sketchbook practice. You've helped me learn that this is a common feeling a lot of us have, artists and no artists, and that I'm not the only one who experiences artistic tantrums. I've also learned that my own disappointment can actually encourage you, so here I am, trying again after failing twice and moving forward on to the next idea. As I rambled, you've been watching that I thought I would play a little and combine my watercolors with the paint markers, and I've been painting with watercolors, which was sort of an unnecessary mistake for this video, and you're gonna understand why in the next idea. But at the moment, I just brought the watercolors out and started painting circles. And you probably guessed it too, I'm painting a mandala. I have painted one before differently in a different video, so I wanted to show you a variation of that because painting them is amazing and there's so many ways to do it. They don't really even have to be perfectly symmetrical. It's more about your connection to the painting and the circles. I explained in more detail on that previous video, so I'll link it in the description in case you're interested. Back to this mandala, I'm using the fine nibs of the markers to add texture to each of the colors. So this circle I filled with concentric circles. The second one I do is a little bit more irregular, and I thought it would be nice to mark the irregular borders with little green dots, make them even more apparent. For the inner circle, I only use straight lines in different colors. And lastly, for the outer circle, I filled it with a little floral pattern with tiny leaves. I painted dots all around it, and here's the final result. I really love it. I love painting mandalas. It makes you feel so good, which I really needed after those previous 2 strikes. Next idea, and I'm bringing the tape back again. But I'm going to use it differently. And I'm also going to show to you why I really didn't need to use my watercolors on the previous idea. With the tape on, I started to paint with my markers on top of it because I figured, or I remembered actually, that these are water-based acrylic paint markers. And if I add water to the paint, it will dilute looking like a watercolor. So I just grabbed a brush with water on it and I started pulling the paint from the tape onto the paper and getting this watercolor effect with my paint markers. As I was working on all of these ideas, I remember this comment I had when I asked what type of sketchbook ideas you wanted to see next. And I think the best way to fill a sketchbook and to improve on your art practice and have something worthy of an advanced art class is use your sketchbook as much as you can. And one of the ways in which you can accomplish that is trying to keep your sketchbook close to you at all times. Just take it everywhere. This set of markers will definitely allow you to create on the go. Whatever free time you have, you can create something while waiting, or I don't know. But with these paint markers, even if it's 5 extra minutes you have, you'll be able to put something down on one of the pages, and it's super convenient because they dry so fast. You have the double nibs to create different types of lines, and you can even carry a water brush pen and create watercolors. So I finished painting all of the page, let it dry, and remove the tape. I'm sure no one could ever tell that this is not watercolor, and I did all of this with the same paint markers. My initial plan for this idea was to go in and draw some super delicate designs on each block with the gold and silver markers only, but for some reason I just felt like adding more color on top at that moment, and I just drew different types of leaves again with different bold colors, layering them, and if the color shows through one of them, you just quickly add another layer of paint on top. Then I added details on each leaf with contrasting colors. Again, not the best thing I've ever painted, but it was really fun to do, and I really wanted to show you another way in which you can use the paint markers. Moving forward, we are going Warhol style. To illustrate this idea, I am using a very simple element. My intention with these sketchbook videos is not for only to show you possible things you could paint and recreate, but mostly to give you ideas and explain concepts that will serve you as a starting point for your own creativity to take over, and for you to be able to explore these very simple concepts and make them your own. So I chose to draw a very simple teapot on each of the rectangles I created. I'm doing each one in a different color and then adding details on top of each of them with a contrasting color, using 4 colors in total. Same thing with the background, just painting them all in different colors to create contrast. And just like that, tape off, and I have this very simple idea that could be dramatically elevated depending on the subject that you choose and how many details you go into. Next idea, and I don't want to scare you, let's just try something, okay? I know a lot of people can get intimidated by this, but we are doing a portrait, and hopefully this idea will help you take down a barrier and will encourage you to try something new. I've painted many types of portraits, realistic ones, distorted ones, and of course a lot of ones in my style. So I know there's a learning curve, but I'm going to try to make it less scary with this exercise. I'm drawing a face and I'm trying to draw it as simple as I can. But honestly, just put a face down. Don't worry about proportions. I think it won't even matter with this idea. Maybe you can even land of something super creative. Maybe just even trace one. It's okay if one eye is in the forehead and the other one lands on the cheekbone. It's happened to all of us. Anyhow, I did tape out the square for the background again. You don't need to do this, but I'm a person with an obsession now, so that's what I did. Then I started color blocking the face with different markers, just really color blocking and being bold, adding any color, just trying things to see where I land. I didn't even erase my pencil lines, and you can see that mixing into the marker. The only thing I did choose to use was most of the neon colors, because when I swatched them in the last video, I realized that on top of white they look more pastel than neon, and that worked for me right there. For the hair though, I went with magenta, just one solid color, which I tied into the rest of the face by painting the lips with it. After doing that, I noticed I hadn't used my neon green, and I just decided to add a little bit of green on top of that too. When that first layer was dry, I introduced a little bit more of color by giving the hair highlights with red and pink markers. I used my gray marker to loosely outline everything. And here's my final result. I think it's bold and beautiful, and I hope this one makes you feel less apprehensive about trying to paint portraits. And just to show you how valid this simple technique was, I'm going to blow it up again and show it to you like a piece of contemporary art in a beautiful space. Okay, next, because I was so deeply disappointed by the tree I painted with the lilac background, and because I chose not to let my artistic tantrum take over me and paint on top of that page, I decided maybe I could show you another way to paint a tree today. I color blocked the whole sky and each of these mountains I drew, or maybe they're more like bushes, I don't know. The point is I painted them with solid colors, and then with lighter markers I added texture on top. Then very simply with the black marker I started drawing the silhouette of a tree and its branches on top of the whole composition I'd already painted. And again, I have to do that weirdly satisfying peel. I just love it. And yeah, that's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed these 10 ideas. Well, it doesn't really feel like we did so many, but yeah, 10 ideas today. And as always, if you like something you saw, please let me know in the comments. And I hope that I'll get to see you next Friday. Have the most wonderful day. Bye.